Okay, so hi everyone. In today's class, we are going to be looking at how to administer virtual machines. This is part of the compute, and what I'm going to do today is we are going to. This class is going to be a little bit, faster than the other ones, and because I'm trying to make sure I'll finish up anything related to compute options today. So I'm going to be combining two different PowerPoints slide. So the first one is how to administer Azure Virtual Machine, which is the one I'm currently sharing. And the other one will be the one with the other compute option. That will come after this one. So I will need to, merge these two together. I'm not sure the pages, the slides on each of those PowerPoint document is that's much. So I'm so sure we can actually finish up both of them. So I might be skipping some of the demonstration session, which will just have to come back to maybe next week or maybe when we're done with the Azure administrator class. And the reason being that I think we are far behind when it comes to our schedule. This is October and we are still on Azure administrator. However, I'm not going to be taking the other classes the same way I've really taken this Azure administrator. I just really want you guys to have a very good understanding of Azure, and that's why I've taken my time to go to the Microsoft slide. So I will be using my own slide when it comes to the Azure security and also the DevOps. More on the DevOps side, we're just going to be using the Azure DevOps portal or and the GitHub environment just to demonstrate whatever we're doing. So I might not be sharing slide for those courses. So like I said, I just have to take my time to explain everything here. Just because I know, once we have a very good understanding of these Azure administrator, we can actually, have that knowledge replicated in other courses also. Okay, so let's start looking at this because, like I said, we've got two PowerPoint slides. We have PowerPoint files we want to go to. The first one being how to administer Azure virtual machines. I'm so sure we all know what virtual machines is, but even at that, there are some things that we need to understand. So, what are the learning objectives when it comes to this particular topic? So, we have introduction to virtual machines. That's what we're going to be talking about, and how to configure virtual machine availability. We've talked about some of the advantages of you leveraging the cloud, and I'm so sure we talked about availability, we talked about reliability and some other benefits. So how do we now make sure that our virtual machines are always available? During the course of the AZ900, we talked about some availability options that we can actually leverage on when it comes to virtual machines. And I'm so sure we discuss the what we call the availability sets. So that's one of the options. That's one of the things we're going to be looking at. There are other options also when it comes to how to configure the virtual machine availability. So let's dive in. So the first one being introduction to virtual machines. And what are we going to be looking at? We are going to be looking at how cloud service responsibilities. When we talked about the different type of services, cloud providers, actually, give out. We talked about IaaS, PaaS, SaaS and the likes. And we all know that the Azure Virtual Machine actually falls under the IaaS type of service provided by these cloud providers. So we are going to be talking about what are the responsibilities when it comes to IaaS. I'm so sure we've been able to look at this. So what are our own responsibility when we leverage on IaaS? We all know when you leverage on SaaS, you are not actually involved in anything hardware. You are not involved in anything data center. All we need you to do is just to bring your own device that you use in connecting to that particular software. A typical example, it's going to be the M365, Microsoft Office, and the likes. But when it comes to IaaS, since you are the one spinning up your storage account, you are the one spinning up your virtual machine, what are things that, what are your own responsibilities and what are the cloud, provider responsibility? That's what we're going to be looking at. Then we're going to plan out to deploy a virtual machine. So then we look at the virtual machine sizing, where we talk about different type of virtual machine sizing that you can actually leverage on. Maybe the general purpose, optimize, and the likes. All depends on what you really want to actually do with this virtual machine. Then we'll move on to the virtual machine storage. Then there will be a demonstration on how to create a virtual machine in the portal. I might not be doing this. We've got in the previous classes, I'm so sure at some point we've been able to create virtual machine. Like I said, we'll still come back to this as part of the lab, but I might be skipping them today. Then how do we connect to the virtual machines? It all depends on the kind of operating system that we have actually deployed on that particular virtual machine, or we've spin up with that virtual machine. Is this virtual machine operating on Windows or Linux? So if that is the case, then we'll look at, if it's Windows, how do we connect to the virtual machine? We can actually leverage what we call the RDP and RDP into the machine. We cannot do the same for a Linux-based machine. So what we configure in that regard is SSH on port 22 and see how we can actually connect to that virtual machine. There are different ways we can actually connect. And when security is what we have in place, or we think about security, then we'll start looking at how can we connect to this virtual machine securely. So I talked about the RDP, I talked about the SSH into those virtual machines. At that point in time, if you want to RDP or you want to SSH into a machine, depending on the operating system, then we are looking at, connecting to these machines over public IP address. So I want to do that from my own system. What about if I do not have a public IP address configured on that particular machine? Then how do I connect to the machine? Yes, some people can argue, okay, maybe you create another jump box, you connect to another jump box, or you create a VPN, so that you can actually connect from your local machine. And you know that even when you create a VPN, the point to site, the site to site, you're still, connecting to that machine over the public, because your VPN is going to public IP address, So at that point in time, if what we really have is just the private IP address and we still want to connect, then we might be leveraging on what we call the bastion. So I will show you how we can actually connect to Azure virtual machines, leveraging bastion from the portal, and how we can actually do it using third-party application like Royal TS. So we'll look at that. So you can even see on the right hand side of this particular page I'm sharing, implement and manage, which is part of the exam if you want to write the exam, and it takes 20 to 25% to tell you that it's a topic you do not want to shy away from. It's a topic you really want to understand, and create what are some of the things you're going to be tested on. How to create a VM, manage images within this compute gallery. So when we talk about the images, we're you're looking at we'll still talk about this image. How can we even create an image from an already existing virtual machine? So we can actually do like a screen grab or a screenshot of that particular machine and create an image out. So it's part of the backup option, but we'll look at that also. Then how do we configure the disk encryption? I'm so sure the last time when we were talking about security when it comes to storage accounts, we're like, how do you secure your data at rest? How do you secure data in transit? For data at rest, we're like, oh, okay, we can actually use encryption so that anything written to that particular storage account, is going to be encrypted. So we have what we call disk encryption in virtual machine, where you want to encrypt, your disks, the C drive, so that everything in there is encrypted. No one is able to have access to the data within that particular disk. Then how can we move virtual machines from one resource group to another, from one subscription to another? Is it even movable? So those are some of the things you're going to be tested in. So let's go ahead and start talking about this Azure virtual machine. Like I said, we are going to be starting with what are the responsibilities when it comes to you that owns the virtual machine, and also when it comes to the cloud provider. We talked about the different type of services provided by these cloud providers, and we've got the IaaS, the PaaS, and the SaaS. And at what point are you going to be involved? Let's say you've got your own data center, or what we call it back then, IT room, where you got your own system and the likes. You are the one in charge of everything. No cloud provider. You're still the one providing everything. You're the one making sure that the servers are on, electricity, the server room is cool, for the server to have, this optimized performance and the like. You're the one in charge. But when it comes to you leveraging the cloud, that means you want to give out some of the responsibilities to the providers. You don't want to care about where the physical machines are. You just want to create your services in there. You just want to create some resources you want to leverage on. So this shows, I'm not going to explain this one after the other because we've done this in 900, but so we're not concerned about the IaaS now, which is where the virtual machine actually tilt to. When we talk about, so you can see this color shows, the light blue color shows that this is the responsibility of the providers, and for the customers we have the deep blue. Now for IaaS, this is the one where the customers actually have most of the responsibilities when it comes to services provided by these cloud providers, Microsoft in this case. The physical data center, you're not involved because you don't see the physical data center. You don't see the machines, the servers where your virtual machine is being hosted on. You don't even see the cables, the Swift, the router, the patch panel, RJ45, and everything. You don't see. So the physical network, it's also being handled by Microsoft in this particular case. But because this is actually a service within IaaS, you can actually go in there and say, I want to create this virtual machine and I want to have Windows operating system on that particular machine. I'm so sure everyone here has actually created a virtual machine, or I just want to have Linux on that particular machine. Okay, it might be Ubuntu, it might be Debian, whatever you want to have on there. So you control the operating system. The network controls, that means how do you want this virtual machine to be able to access the internet? You want to decide what happens to that particular network, on that particular virtual machine. So you are actually the one in charge when it comes to the applications on the machine, because this is just like I always call it like a skeleton system given to you. Not the we've got system that we refer to as bare metal, but this is not bare metal. This is virtual machine. At least you've got operating system and the like. But it's a new system. You can install whatever you want on it. You say, oh, I think I want antivirus on it. So you decide which application goes on. So how do you access this particular machine? How do you access this particular resource? So you are the one in charge of the identity and directory infrastructure. Do you want to make sure that when you're accessing this machine, it is actually joined with a domain, or you want it as maybe personal or something like that? the account that you use in accessing the machine, is this going to be a local account? Is it going to be a work account? You want to decide that. For you to be able to access your virtual machine again, you need a device. You need your physical device to actually connect to the virtual machine. So you also bring your own device, then the information and data that you want to store on the virtual machine. So literally, when you leverage IaaS, which is where the virtual machine actually is categorized, you are going to be involved in managing most of the things except the physical data, the physical machine, and the physical network. Moving on, how do we now plan the creation of machines? Just like other resources also, we've got to have, like, you know done some dependencies when it comes to you creating a virtual machine. Your virtual machine always needs a network, and we're talking about IP addresses, private IP address, public IP address, regardless of if you want this machine to be able to communicate within, with other machines or resources within your environment, or you want to export it to the internet. You still need to have this machine within a network. So is that you are leveraging an already created virtual network, or you want to create a new one and have that virtual machine attached to, um, the interface of that machine attached to, that particular network. The name of the virtual machine, in this case, your virtual machine doesn't have a URL, just like the storage account, just like the keyword, which makes them, when you're creating them, you have to create them with a unique name. No, this machine, I can have a machine called Labs O1 in my own tenant, and TJ can have the same name within his own tenant. So because there is no URL, there is no endpoint. So your virtual machine doesn't have an endpoint. So you don't need to have like unique name when actually creating your virtual machine. And locations, yep, for every resource that we create in Azure, we need like a location. So you need a location. It all depends on what are available within that location. There are some locations where you've got some properties, for your virtual machine, or capabilities, which might not be in another location. So you want to consider, and why are you considering compliance also, the GDPR, you want to make sure that you actually deploying machines where, um within the regions where you're going to be compliant, so, and also you need to consider the pricing. So depending on the size, how many um v CPUs you're creating, how large is your disks, do you want like a premium disks, do you want SSD, do you want iDrive, all these makes up the price. So you consider the pricing also. I was talking about the virtual machine sizing, and we've got so many of them. However, they are categorized under, so we've got like 5 or 6 categories, and within, under each of these categories, let me just show you these so that we don't use the slides to start. So let's say, I'm just gonna pick one of these machines. So we've got so many sizes, but you have the size categorized. All depends on what you really want to use that virtual machine for. But majority of the ones that we deploy, they are actually within the general purpose, except when you need something very high, or let's say, like for AI now, you need the GPU, to be able to do that. You need something with great compute and the likes. It all depends on what you really want. But we've got. I just really want to show you. Let's see. Okay, it's taking time. Now, once that is done, I would pop that in back. So let's continue here, as we don't have all the time. Okay, so that's still okay. I think we have it. So I'm just gonna go to no come on. So you always have these, so you can see we've got so many. All depends on what you're actually planning to deploy. We have them categorized in like alphabetical series. So most of the time, even when they've got B series, D series, that's not what we're actually looking at. The type we're looking at, even when it's D or B, or is it general purpose, so you look at what you really want to use it for, and if that suits you, then you can actually go with it. So you can see like this one, which is the most common one, the D series version 3, which is general purpose, and you can use it for everything, depending on whatever you want to use it for. And how many CPUs, virtual CPUs, how many RAM. At least for most of us, what we consider when we want to go get maybe a new system is, oh, what's the size of the RAM, what's the size of the data disks, I think that's what most of us actually consider when you want to get a new system. And like, your virtual machine is not an exception. It's works the same way your system works. So there's some things you want to consider. So we have different types. We have the general purpose, which is balanced CPU to memory ratio. You have the compute optimized. So when you have the compute optimized, you are looking at high CPUs to memory. I really want this to be a little bit faster, or you want the memory optimized. Are you looking at storage optimized, or are you looking at something with, high performance, better graphics, or video editing, most of the time for people for deploying most of these AI services, I've seen people leverage on the GPU, and or you want the high performance compute, which is the fastest and the most powerful. But know that all this type comes with their different pricing. So if you are looking at leveraging GPU or high performance compute machines, then you're going to be paying more than when you leverage the general purpose type of virtual machine sizing. So you've gone in there, you can go in there within your Azure environment, even if you want to leverage on what's it again, the labs provided by Microsoft. You can actually still see um, different categories of those machines sizing that we have, and just play with it. But do not deploy very high GPU machines or high performance compute. And if you do, you can always delete it almost immediately, or else it's gonna take all the money that you have in there. So how do we determine the virtual machine storage? We all know that when you create, like, or when you get a new system, there's always a storage where your operating system is going to be stored. Most of the time is the C drive. So do you want to add additional to this particular C drive, um, or whatever the name you've given to that particular drive? You can have a different one and call it a data disk, which is optional. But the most compulsory one, or the compulsory one when you're creating a virtual machine, it needs to come at least with one disk, which is where your operating system files are going to be written to. So you want to look at that. Do you want to leverage on HHD standard or premium or ultra? Like I said, when you look at these, or when you pick any of these options, you are still looking at the pricing. You should consider pricing also, because what premium SSD will do it will be different from the kind of work your standard SSD or HDD would do. So you want to consider that when you're actually choosing the type of storage within your virtual machine. Um, Creating a virtual machine in Portal, like I said, I'm gonna skip this. I'm so sure you guys know how to create a virtual machine. But in case you don't, just go to resource and try to create a new virtual machine. And how do we connect to the virtual machine? I'm not going to connect. But let's say I want to connect to the virtual machine. So you've got this option here where you can even download the RDP. It all depends on the kind of operating system you're leveraging. With this virtual machine, I know I've got Windows on those machines. So if I want to connect, I'll connect via the LDP. You can also use the LDP client. So you see, you can actually download the LDP file and try to connect with that particular machine to that particular machine. You can also connect to this machine using Bastion, but you need to set up a Bastion. When we talked about the virtual networks, I talked about different subnet that you can actually have. The standard subnet, which where we have our resources like virtual machine attached to, it's not the kind of one when you want to deploy Bastion. Bastion has his own dedicated subnet, just the same way when you are creating VPN within the Azure environment, that has got its own dedicated VPN subnet you can actually create also. So same thing goes with the firewall. So when you're creating, so this one is just going to create like a different subnet for you within that particular virtual network. And within that network, within that subnet is where the IP address, that you're going to use in connecting to the machine via Bastion is going to be assigned to. So you can go ahead to just see, but it's part of the labs that we're still going to be doing. So we're going to be connecting to the machine using Bastion. And what Bastion does is it lets you connect remotely. You can see I'm able to connect here. That means I do not need to have or to leverage the RDP client application on my system. So it's not going over the public internet. I'm connecting within Azure. But what if you want to connect outside Azure? What if you want to leverage, the Bastion, but you do not want to log into Azure first before you can connect? So you can leverage third-party applications like Royal TS, which it helps you, connect, by leveraging Bastion over private IP address. So we're going to look at that also. So I'm going to. So it all depends on what protocol. So if you are leveraging RDP, like I said, port 3389 needs to be open, and this have to be a Windows machine. If you are leveraging SSH, this is going to be like a Linux system, and this needs to have port 22 open. So how do we? I think I just connect to one of the machine and let's see. But I've got no Bastion created now. So when you want to connect to, I'm not sure I've got any of mine. So for me, when I want to connect, I use the RDP, put in the public IP address of the machine here. So like I said, if you want to connect, using the VPN also, you do not want to you want to connect using the private IP address of that machine. You can also have your VPN created and connect over the VPN. But even at that, your point to site VPN to connect over the public IP address or public network. So it might not really be like a case of, oh, okay, it's secured, except if you just want to limit it. Yeah, it's better than opening it up to the internet though. But so how do we connect? Like I said, let's say you're leveraging the Azure Bastion. So your Azure Bastion needs to connect, over, through the portal. So based on what Microsoft has done, is connect only via the portal, except when you leverage third-party applications, for that particular connection. So it's always connecting over a secure solution, over SSL. Depending on the kind of operating system or machine, if it's Windows or if it's Linux, and you're going to be using the private IP. You can see that there is nowhere here in this particular architecture diagram you're seeing where you have a public IP address, and that's what Bastion actually gives you. So it lets you connect to your machine over a private IP address. So if you have got any questions, so I'm so sure I've explained this. Bastion deployed. All you need to is just to deploy your Azure Bastion subnet within the virtual network, where your machine are or machines are. Then you're going to be able to connect to those target machines via that Azure Bastion subnet. You can see even the target VNet subnets where the VMs are, and your Azure Bastion subnets are actually within the same virtual network. So you're going to be able to do that. So you cannot configure your Bastion in a different network and try to connect to a target machine in a different network. No, so they need to be on the same virtual network. Okay, lovely. Learning recap. Fine. Configure virtual machine availability. So how do we make sure that we do not have downtime? And that's what this means. So how do we plan for maintenance and downtime? How do we set up what we call the availability set? We've mentioned something related to this where we talk about the update domain and the fork domains. And a few weeks back also, I'm so sure I asked that question, from you people to differentiate the two type of domain that we have when it comes to the availability set. So the update domain and fork domain, the collection of both makes up what we call the availability set. Then we can also talk about the availability zones. We all know, what zones are. How do we make sure that we leverage on zones, to make sure that our applications are not, our virtual machines are not down. So when you talk about the availability set, the update domain, fork domain, we are still talking about a particular data center, man. So what if that data center is gone, is dead, is down? What do we do? So we can actually leverage the availability zone. Another thing is for us to compare what we call scaling. Now we're going to be comparing vertical scaling and horizontal scaling. So we are going to look at that. And how do we now configure this scaling? So we are going to see like real life example of I'm just gonna talk about it, why or how this scaling actually benefits most organization. A typical example would be from Jump in those years where when you want to check your results because of the kind of machine where or the kind of hosting option Jamb was actually leveraging at that time, it's always so difficult to connect to the Jamb site just to retrieve your network because lots of traffic at that particular point in time. And so if they were leveraging Azure at that time, they can actually just use this option, this virtual machine scaling option. So I said we are going to look at the vertical and horizontal scaling, and at what point do we leverage the vertical? At what point do we leverage the horizontal? What's even the difference and the likes? And that's what we're going to be looking at. So, how do we plan for maintenance and downtime? I'm so sure you've seen most of these. If you have worked on servers, if you have worked some of the time your system might be, so we have like planned hardware maintenance. When you have a planned hardware maintenance, and there's some of the time you would see mails from your bank and they like that and say, oh, on the 28th of this month, at so time to so time, we are going to be, a way we are going to, our system might not be accessible, our application might not be accessible, and that's planned hardware maintenance, so the platform actually predicts, and that happens within the Azure environment also, where the platform predicts a failure and issued, an unplanned hardware maintenance. In this case, live migration actually is required. So we have what we call the unexpected downtime, where your machine just go down unexpectedly. And in this case, what Microsoft has done is to make sure that your machine is automatically migrated. So we say, oh, you are able to access it, but what they've done is they've actually migrated that particular machine, to another machine. And the last one, sorry, the first one I explained is unplanned, but when it goes down, there is a migration. So, and the last one is going to be a planned maintenance, where you have, events of saying, oh, okay, we are going to be updating this particular. No action is actually required, because this will be migrated if there is a need for a migration to happen. But in all, what Microsoft is trying to make sure is your virtual machines are always available to you. Now let's leverage what we call the availability set. We've talked about different options that we can have to make sure that we have our machines always available. Availability set is one of the options, and is the first one we're going to be talking about here. So when you leverage availability set, what we are doing is, within the data center, we want our machines replicated on different servers. That means if there is a downtime, in maybe one of the server, we should still be able to access our machine. Now, this brings us to what we call the fault domains and the update domain. Do we have anyone that can actually explain what the fault domain is and an update domain? Anyone? If you are listening to me on LinkedIn or on YouTube, you can type it in, just comment in there. But for those guys on Teams, anyone, okay, without delays, so like I said, when you have the four domains, now these are set of machines that share the same points of failure. Now you have like series of servers. You have servers all within a rack. So we can have like 8 servers on that particular rack, and you want to deploy your virtual machine. So what Microsoft does is, once it deploys the virtual machine in one of those servers
Hello,
on that
Philip.
particular rack, yep,
I just want to try.
yeah, go ahead, please.
I know you said we should not use that thing, but let me just try. Okay, so update domain. I think there are those virtual machines that can, I think with just one click, you can update them all at once or reboot them.
So we are not the
While
one updating them though.
okay, then while fault domain, I think those ones, that those virtual machines that if anything happens to maybe the VN in the, maybe let me just say same, they use the same hardware or something, all of them can just go down at once.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. So that's what I said, like, the same point of failure, even when they are, deployed on different servers, but they are still on the same rack. And that's rack, all the machines or hardware on that particular rack shares the same point of failure. So let's say I just go in that data center and say, oh, I don't even like this plug. Let me unplug it, or so all the machines there are gone, they just go down. So, and that's why, what's like what we have in this picture, it says two for domains. That means on this rack, I want my virtual machine deployed there, and on another rack, I want my virtual machine deployed there. That means, uh, someone cannot just say, oh, okay, I'm targeting this particular company, rack 31 and rack 1. Those are where the machines are. You can't even know, So what Microsoft is saying is, no two fault domains are going to be, rebooted at the same time. Um, same thing goes with the update domain. So for the update domains, these are collections of machines or set of machines that are updated and rebooted at the same time. So when we have that, the update domains doesn't mean that that means no two machines are going to be on the same rack for sure. But in this case, we are not looking at that. We are looking at the fact that these machines can actually be on different racks, but they are updated at the same time. Do you understand? They can be so even when they are on different racks, Microsoft is making sure that no two machines from the same update domain or from no two update domains are actually restarted at the same time. That means no two machines are actually restarted at the same time within that particular domain. So we have 5 in here, as you can see, and based on that, Microsoft says, if you leverage availability set, then the SLA is going to be 99.95. That means at least roughly in a year, you might have a downtime of, let's say 14 hours or so, but, you hardly have that. So that's what we have here. So we can configure machines to use availability set. If you want to go a little bit, maybe you want a better option, then you might start looking at, okay, what if that data center is down? What if it goes down? What are we going to do? Then at that point, you might be thinking of availability zones, But within test environment, I don't use any of these, but that's not it's test. Don't do that in production. Don't try that at all. So let's go. We talked about the fact that at some point, if you have a particular machine hosting your application and we've got a lot of traffic, a typical example was the Jamb web application that I just talked about, where you have a lot of people trying to check their result at the same time, and you say, "Oh, this is dragging," "Oh my, this is not working," and the likes. It's just because that particular hardware, whatever capability it has, the traffic coming in is more than what it can actually cater for. So, what are we going to do in that case? It might be the fact that we've got 8 gig RAM, and that machine, if we upgrade the RAM to maybe 32 gig, yes, better for performance for sure. This guy has got 500 GB of memory, and we say, oh, what if we take it to 2 terabytes? Yeah, that's fine, but at some point we say, oh, okay, you have upgraded to 32 GB. There is no way you can actually upgrade this again. That's the capability. That's what it can take. You don't go more than 32, because when we are designing this particular machine, we said upgradable to, it can't go more than that. So in that case, what are we going to do? So we need additional machine at that time. Is that how we get an additional machine? Because we cannot upgrade the one we have. We've upgraded that one, and we've reached that limit. So what are we going to do? We need to get another one. So when you add more hardware, or when you upgrade the hardware within that particular machine, then what we say you're doing is you are doing a vertical scaling, because you are scaling up. You are saying, I have 8 gig RAM, I want to scale up to 32 gig RAM. So we'll say you are scaling up. When you say, oh, okay, at this point in time, I'm not so sure we need 32 gig, because that machine, we no longer use it as a server. We've given it to Barafemi just to be, using it for his Excel and Word documents, work. And I'm not so sure what document needs 32 gig. I think we can remove, the 24 and have, the remaining 8 gig in there. So what we've done at that particular time is scale down. So when we talk about the vertical scaling, we are talking about the process of scaling up and scaling down. it's just on a single instance. It's just on a single workload, you know. But when it talks about, oh, let's add more, compute. Let's this machine, this is what it can take, you know. If the CPU usage of this particular machine has gone up to 90%, please create additional machine for me to cater for, the incoming traffic. When that one gets to 80% and it lasts for, maybe that traffic stays, your CPU usage stays at 80% for the next 10 minutes, please create another one. So you can have this automated, um, and that's what we refer to as, horizontal scaling. So in this case, we are scaling out and scaling in. So when you scale out, that means you are adding more compute power, more compute, more machines, more instances. Then when we scale in, we are reducing it. At what point do we scale out and scale in? And that's why, the manual intervention might not be the best way in this case. Sleeping at 2 a.m. and they said, oh, a lot of people are trying to access your machine. Your machine is going down. Some people do load testing on your machine, on your application. Google, Microsoft.com, a lot of them, they would just see traffic coming from, different angles, and they need to actually respond to that traffic. And at that point in time, they need to scale out, and that scaling out process needs to be automated. So when we scale out and scale in, we're talking about the horizontal scaling to getting this back. So we have the cloud in this case, having that capability, having that benefit where you can add more compute, more instance to your, to your workload, automatically. So you're adding more machines. Say, oh, okay, so this guy needs this machine, then add this, add this, add this. And when maybe the traffic start reducing, everyone has checked their jam results, everyone has gone back home in the middle of the night, then no one is really using it at that time. Same way, when you want to order, let's say we've got Black Friday now on Amazon, at that point, or Prime Day, a lot of people will want to order at that particular time. That's a lot of traffic coming in. I could remember the first time Jumia, wanted to do Black Friday in Nigeria back then. Their application went down. Was too slow. People were not even able to get what, because at that time they were not able to, that particular workload hosting that particular application was not able to cater for the traffic coming in. So if they were leveraging horizontal scaling within the Azure environment that time, you will have scaled out, you will have created more instances to cater for those machines. And when the Black Friday has gone, then those machines will be discarded automatically based on the metrics you've set. So we are going to look at some of the metrics that we can actually use to determine if the machines could actually scale out or scale in, or you want, so typically we use maybe CPU usage, memory, number of traffic, all depends on what you want, so you can actually manually update or auto scale, but for me it doesn't make any sense. If you are doing that, say, oh, okay, let's set this schedule. Let's even say you're not manually, you're saying, okay, most of the time we've noticed that by 3 p.m. that's when the traffic starts increasing. Then you set a schedule to say by 3 p.m. A new instance should be created for you, or so that's manual scaling, manual update and the likes. But why not let the system do this just by leveraging on some of the metrics within that particular system? So you want to use your CPU usage. Most of the time, I'm so sure this has happened to you, your laptop and or your phone, and you say, oh, the phone is hanging, maybe because I've opened a lot of browsers, a lot of and you just close it and say, oh, some people will say, oh, just restart it. And when you restart, all those processes are killed. The processes that were running before, they'll get killed, and your system starts on a clean note and say, oh, now it's fast. It's just because whatever you're running on there, the traffic on there, if maybe you have consumed the CPU memory, the CPU percentage, of that particular system. So you have that, within that particular machine to say, oh, okay, this is what I've used, and I think we just need to scale out and the scaling or something like that. So you can actually use that. You can actually use memory. You can actually use your maybe the number of traffic coming into this to say, oh, okay, this is what I want. This is how I want it, and the like. So another option is to have what we call the virtual machine scale cells. That when we talk about the scaling, so the scaling doesn't happen with the virtual machine itself. It happens with the virtual machine scale set, which is another option, for availability. So when we create a virtual machine scale set, so we are talking about set of machines that are load balanced, to scale in or scale out to provide, to provide uh what was it, yeah, maybe services when it comes to um your traffic that comes in based on the number of traffic coming in. So when we create a virtual machine scale set, I don't have one here, so you're trying to create one. We are going to see options where you can actually, let's see if that's what we call the VMSS. So you can even see the way it looks. It's not just like the virtual machine, like a single one. We've got multiple machines that you're gonna be creating at. So in
Sorry
this
about
case,
that, Femi. I want to ask a question.
yeah, tell me.
Okay. So I want to ask the horizontal. So is it a function, is an automation that make it, because it's like both of them does the same thing? I don't know if I'm getting this wrong. Anyway,
Can you say that
as
again?
in terms of horizontal, as in the horizontal and the
They don't do the same
virtual.
thing. They don't do the same
Sorry,
thing.
and the horizontal. Okay, but and
So
both of them be set automatic, or
yeah, but
are
they
both
they
okay?
no, because um the the vertical scaling is more of manual.
Yeah, okay,
Your
okay.
machine will not go in there to upgrade the CPU or the what's it? We're not going there to upgrade the RAM, or
Yes, so because it's like those who have it, but I mean, on the premises, they are the one that use the vertical.
yeah, you can, yeah, but you can also use the vertical in Azure. So
Imagine.
yeah, a typical example is you just going to your machine and say, oh, this machine is too slow, maybe because of two
The
vCPU that
traffic,
I've created. I want to change the RAM to 8 gig.
the
So
bigger
you
one. Okay.
yeah, if you go in there to the sizing, if you go to that virtual machine, and that was where I went to the other time. You go to the size, you can actually pick a different size and
Increase
upgrade
it.
to that size. Yeah.
Okay.
So when you're creating
Okay,
a
I get
virtual
it.
machine scale set, for horizontal scaling, you see how this works. Now it's going to ask you, how do you want to scale? Do you want to do an auto scaling? You don't want to scale, manual scaling, and you continue with these. And at that point, you are going to be talking about how many instances do you want to have created, and what's going to be the distribution. How do you scale this your machine? The number of base machine that you want to have. If you do not want to have any machine, you just want to have one running, and when the traffic comes or start coming in, you want to have multiple machines being created. How long do you want this machine? What's going to be maybe your metrics? Maybe you have 100% CPU usage, or 90%, and how long is this CPU usage going to last before it starts scaling out? I can say, okay, let's say I have CPU usage of 80%, and it stays there for almost 10 minutes, and that's the metrics. Please create a new machine, and so you can actually look at these and check, but it's still going to be part of our lab. So this is just a manage instance. It talks about how you can actually do like a scale in, scale out, how you can actually leverage zones. It's all about availability. So let me know before if you have any question. Then
Yeah. So, Femi, for the VMSS, can you use different OS for them for each of the
no, no,
virtual
no,
machine
no.
under
You
the VM?
cannot. You cannot. You cannot.
Them.
This is
Okay.
is going to be just an instance. It's scaling out. No, you
Okay.
can't. You can't do that.
Okay.
Just give me a minute, please. I'm looking at the other slide. Okay. So, any other question before we start going through this particular slides? Or do you want us to stop where we are now? I just quickly want to complete this compute options that we can actually go, and the next class is just going to be the last class. And when it comes to anything theoretical, then we'll start talking about the labs. But I want to get rid of this particular course this month is possible, if possible, so that we can actually focus on other things. We've been here for a
Yes.
long time.
Yes, I think we can go ahead with the slide too.
Yeah, we will. So here we'll talk about how to administer pass, other pass compute options. We talk about IaaS now, and virtual machine is actually the IaaS, compute option that we have. But at the end of the day, we want to start hosting our web applications, hosting our desktop applications, and the likes on other pass options. What pass options? So we'll start talking about app service. We'll talk about container instance and the likes, and so that's what we're going to be talking about here. So here, the learning objective is how to configure service plans and how to configure the app service itself, the container instance, But before we dive into this, let me just give you what to expect. Now, when we talk about app service plans and the app service, so what we are saying is when you have a building, how do you configure this building? So when you configure the building, maybe you want to have 3 rooms and the likes. The rooms in there are just part of the building itself. Nobody knows what's in there, but you have actually configured or created a plan, a master plan to say this is how I want it. But you cannot have a 23 bedroom, in a place where you've, or maybe in a house where you've actually planned to have like 3. If you have that means the rooms are going to be much more smaller, or not even conducive for you to even stay. So
Way more.
your plan actually encapsulates your app service. So you can, within your app service plan, you can have multiple applications deployed within that particular plan. Do you get? So that's it. So your plan encapsulates your app service. So within your app service plan within the app service plan is where we'll start configuring scaling. We'll start saying, oh, this is the kind of application that I want to deploy within this particular plan. It's going to be a .NET application and the like. That means when we start deploying apps, within that particular plan, we need to focus on the .NET and the like. So we are going to look at that. The same thing goes with the container instance, the app, and the likes. Yeah, TJ, you wanted to say something?
No, sorry, I was just buttressing what you're saying that the rooms will be so small. I was not saying
Yeah,
like tape.
it will be. Okay, so let's start with the app service plan. So what are we going to look at? We are going to look at how to implement the app service plan. We're going to determine app service plan pricing, scale up and scale out of your app service plan. So here in this case, you can see we are not just scaling out and in. There are options to scale up. You say, oh, this app service plan, we created basic, and the basic can only, host maybe 5 web applications or 5 applications. Why not let's scale out to standard, or scale out to scale up to standard, or scale up to this particular one, so that, or you want just to scale out and make sure that you've got a plan that can actually host whatever you need to host, and within that plan you want to have multiple machines created for you. At the end of the day, you know that the underlying service or underlying resource is still the virtual machine. So, but because it's a pass option, you won't have access to the virtual machines, but it's still the virtual machine. So we're scaling out, we are creating more virtual machines to host our applications. It's just, but you don't have access. In this case, you are not the one managing the everything, the operating system, and the patching. Everything is done by you, by Microsoft. In this case, all you need is just to bring your own application and host on it. So yeah, it's just you having a hosting platform already created for you, or just bring whatever you want to host on there, and host it. So that's what we have in there. So yeah, so we are going to be determining performance, price, features. It's just part of the plans. Do you want to have free where you can only deploy for 60 minutes, or do you want to have something that can last for the whole 24 hours, and with better features and the likes? And you can also determine what compute resource for your web application to run, the region where you want this to run on, the number of virtual machine instance. Like I said, the underlying resource or the underlying service is still going to be the virtual machine. Then the pricing tier, which is what we're going to be looking at. Then we can have one or more app configured within the same service plan. Like I said, when you have your service plan, Azure service plan, app service plan, sorry, you can have more than one application being deployed depending on the kind of application. So we're going to look at, in the next slide, I'm so sure it's going to talk about the pricing tier, like I said, and there you can see the number of instances you can actually deploy. You can actually see if you could leverage on features like scaling, auto scaling or not. How long can this, the number of memories, how long can you have this? I know for free, if you leverage on the free tier, you can only have this run for 60 minutes in a day, and after that, 60 minutes is done. And that's fine if I'm just using it for testing, and so that's it. And this is what I'm talking about. So when you have your app service plan, you have got different plans for you. Do you want to have free? Yeah, you can only have maybe 10 applications deployed in there. But even I've said, oh, you can have just 10 applications deployed. Is it possible for you when it's not Excel that you're deploying, because you only have 1 gig disk space. So your application, your one application can even be up to 1 gig, or so are you sure you're going to be able to test, except if that application is light? And can you leverage on auto scaling? Yeah, no, you cannot. You can only manually scale, man. So why do I want to go for this? I will only go for this if I just want that. And another feature for app service is what we call the deployment slot. So the deployment slot is, oh, okay, I just want to have just one particular machine, one particular app service, but within there, I want to have this divided into 2. One part for production and one part for testing or for dev. So whatever we want to do, we want to see this in dev before we switch it over to production. So you have anything you do when you deploy to your app service and you have different deployment slots, the first slot will take the latest updates. You can check whatever you want to, and after then when you now push it, it's going to switch. So you have something that says, oh, this is just the dev, and this is for the prod, or this is for the preview, and this is for the prod. So you can have like your app service divided into different environments, or you can have, let me put it this way, you can have different environment created within your app service, and by leveraging on what we call the deployment slots. So maximum instances that you can actually upgrade to, that's not applicable when you leverage on the free plan in plan pricing. Okay, let's say I want more than that. I've got more application, and by the way, like I said, the free only runs for 60 minutes. It might not be written here, but it only runs for 60 minutes in a day. The shared, which is the dev test, still 100. Disk space almost the same, 1 gig, no auto scaling, deployment 0, deployment slot 0, maximum instance that you can actually scale out to. Even when they said auto scaling no, that means there is still no manual scaling, because you can see you cannot even have instances, 0 instance. So the scaling starts from the basic, which is the basic dedicated, which is the third one. And at that point, even if you are leveraging the basic dedicated dev test, you can only manually scale. But at that time, if you leverage on the basic dedicated dev, you can see you can actually have unlimited numbers of applications, mobile, web, API hosted on it. But is that going to be possible? Is it going to be unlimited? Because you only have, 10 GB space. And when that is gone, then there is no way you could actually have more applications running on that same machine. A lot of people might go put applications in there, and at the end of the day say, oh, this thing is too slow. It's just because the disk space is not able to cater for all the applications that you want to put in there. Then we have the standard production workload, where the auto scaling option is now supported on with 50 GB space, unlimited applications being deployed in there, and you have up to 5 deployment slots that you can actually create. So I can have dev, test, QA, production, or whatever, if it's environment based, or you just want to name it something else, so you can have deployment slot and see your application in this particular slot before you even push it to the next slot, or before you switch over to the next slot, and you can actually have maximum instance. That means you can scale out up to 10 instances. So when you create your auto scaling, you can scale, you can say, oh, okay, so in this case, let's say Microsoft Jamb was actually leveraging on this. When the traffic start coming in, new virtual machines are going to be created for that particular application, and the way this thing works, there is actually a load balancer in there that is actually directing the traffic, but everything is managed by Microsoft. So what you need to do is just to set the scaling option, or the metrics on how you want your app service to be scaling out, or to leverage on the horizontal scaling, and that will be done for you. Same thing goes with the premium, but you can see there are differences when it comes to the the disk space, and the number of deployment slots, or the maximum instances that you can actually create. So all these, or the pricing might not be here, but that there is no way the shared dev test is going to have the same price with the high performance security and isolation. There are more features than what you can see here, but these are the basic features you can see that differentiates each of these pricing plan that you have within Azure. So we've been talking about scaling up, scaling out, and how does that apply to the app service plan that we have. how do we scale out, what are some of the things that we can actually leverage on. Now, when you scale up, like I said, you are adding, it's still that same instance, that same compute workload. But what you're trying to do, because we're talking about, vertical scaling in this case, we are scaling up. Now we're adding more hardware. We want to say, oh, okay, we want to add more memory, more disk space. We want to make sure that, oh, okay, the 8 gig RAM is upgraded to 32 gig, and that's what you're looking at there. So yeah, you scale up. You can actually leverage on the manual scaling, or you want to create a custom auto scaling. And this all depends on the kind of plan. Yeah. So don't go and create a free app service plan and you say, oh, Baba Femi, I'm not able to scale. I can't even see that option. That option is not in free. So if you want to have, that auto scaling, it starts with the standard one, which is the standard production. And if you want to scale out, at this point in time, it is not just you adding more hardware capabilities. You are actually adding more number of instances. So you can actually leverage on the manual scaling, or within the manual scaling, you say, oh, okay, I know this time is when we've got more traffic coming in. Then at that point in time, I'm just going to create a new instance, or you want to have like a scheduler in there that creates that for you at that particular time. But why not leverage on auto scaling, which is based on predefined rules, like say, oh, okay, 80% of CPU usage on this particular instance, and if it lasts for 10 minutes, this should actually auto scale for me. And that's what this is actually showing here. I'm saying, okay, I want to scale out, to a specific number of counts. The instance counts, should be 2. Do I have a specific time that I want to scale? It goes in there. But why do I want to do this if I can leverage on other metrics also? This is leveraging on maybe scaling, but you can also have, other metrics, because I'm scaling based on the instance count, and that's why I'm saying, okay, scale to, at this particular time, and it should end at this particular time. But what if I want to scale based on metrics? But I want to say, oh, okay, the CPU usage at this point in time, if it's this and it's this, please scale out, for me. So we look at that. Like I said, I will just continue talking about the theoretical aspect, no demonstration today. We can do this once we started doing the labs. Configure app service itself. Now we've actually looked at how to configure the plans, or what the plans look like, and how we can actually scale out, by leveraging maybe the manual scaling, or the auto scaling, how we can actually leverage matrices in there, or what are some of the differences when it comes to the pricing plan? What are the features associated with each of these plans? Now let's talk about the app service, the web application, the mobile application, the desktop application, API apps that we want to deploy in there. How do we now implement this particular app? How do we create this app? How do we create the deployment slot that I talked about? How do we add more slots if needed? By leveraging manual scaling up at that time.
Hi, Femi.
Yep.
Sorry to take you back a bit. Please, can you go back to what's it called? The last slide that has the pricing. I just have a question. I'm trying to jot down something. So I just want to confirm this determine app pricing. Is this what you do? That okay? Maybe to determine the what's called the amount that we need to pay Azure for the what's it called?
Yeah, so this will let you know how much you're going to be paying, because regardless of the number of app service that you have in there, this is going to be like a fixed price. Do you understand? Because this is coming with the feature saying, if you leverage the standard production workload, you have unlimited number of applications that you can deploy. The disk space is 50 GB. You've got auto scaling. You've got auto scaling deployment slot of 5 and up to 10 instances. Do you get what I'm saying? So this
Yeah.
will give you the price of what you're going to be paying at the end of the day. Do you get what I'm saying?
Okay, so if maybe I want to use this standard production workload, but I have more than 10 virtual machines, so that means I have to pay more.
If you Can you say that again?
So I'm saying, for example, I want to go with the standard option. However, I want to use more than 10 virtual machines. That means I have to pay more, isn't it?
No. So when you scale, you are adding more instances, right? You pay for those instances. Do you understand it? But in this case,
Okay.
the way it works, you only pay for what you use. Do you get what I'm saying? So if your machine scales out, then you are going to be paying for that machine at that particular time. That's going to be like an add-on. Do you get an add-on price? You know,
Yeah, but I don't think you understand my question. So does that mean you will still be within the standard work production, or once I exceed this 10 instance, I must go automatically to the premium? That's what I'm trying to understand.
if you want to go up to more than that, you need to move on to the next stage, to the next
Oh,
pricing cycle.
okay. So I can't stay within the standard and say, oh, okay, if the price for 10 is, let's say, £100, but I still want to be in standard and I
No,
want
you
to
cannot.
increase to
You
maybe
cannot.
20. Let
That's
me
why
pay
the
200.
maximum instance is 10.
Okay, okay, okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, um, so as I was saying, so we how do we now secure this application at the app service application? I'm so sure we've done this though, where I created like an application within Azure environment. Then so when we mean secure, we just don't want to open this to everyone. Let's say I have an internal documentation site, that I do not want everyone and on the internet have access to, then I can actually secure this and add the people that I want, on that particular application. Only those people can actually access those applications. So we can actually secure our app service. We can also leverage on some other identity providers, also not just the Microsoft one. We can also have our custom domain, associated with that particular app service. When you create your app service, it's going to come with a random, dot azurewebsite.net name. So no one will take you serious if I'm saying, oh, okay, you want to visit my site. My site is babafemi.azurewebsite.net. Why not have babafemi.com, so I can create my own custom domain, and then you can actually back up your app service. So this just shows the kind of applications you can actually deploy within your app service. So when you want to create your app service, you can actually have web applications like, the one online like jam.com, if API apps, mobile applications, function apps, desktop apps, deployed on this particular, so it's a pass offering. So that means it's almost managed by the cloud providers. You only manage your application bit. Just bring your own application and codes and the likes. Same way, there are some where the only thing you need to bring is just the code. When you leverage on the serverless applications, the serverless one, which is the Azure function. Like, so this just shows, regardless of the language you've written your application with, maybe .NET, .NET Core, Java, Python, you can actually host your application on there. How do we create this app service? How do you create your application? I think let me just let's just do that. That will make it easy so that we can actually add this. So So I'm just going to go to app service. So one thing is, let's say you do not have an app service plan. Like I said, when you want to create your app service application, you need an app service plan. So if you do not have an app service plan, this guy is going to create, is going to create like an app service plan for you while you're creating your app service. So I want to create like a web application, just a web application. And I hope I don't know what's going on with Azure. Sometimes it takes. So this is going to show you which of the subscription do you want to create, just the same way we create other other resource also. But in this case, because you want to create a web app, so we need like what's going to be the website name. So I can have, okay, let's say Babafemi B. So when I create this, it's going to create something like this. But at this point, this is actually there's something I need to change here. Just give me not container. Yep, sorry. So I want a secure unique host name. So I just don't want random name. So I can just turn that off, and this is going to have babafemi dot Azure website. Once I create this, you're going to be able to access it. Then if you want Microsoft to just create like a unique name for you, you can also do that. It's just picking a random name and putting the the region where I'm actually deploying this. But I just want this to be babafemi dot Azure website.net. Then I'm going to do that. Then do we want to have your code? Is it just the code you want to deploy? Is it .NET? Is it Java? Or you want to deploy like a container? So we'll talk about the container, which is the one on the next slide or something. Where instead of you hosting your applications on PaaS services or on Azure, you can actually have your application and whatever your application needs to run all within one particular environment. So everything needed. So in that case, what's happening is, let's say you want to create an application now. You can see immediately I pick the code. Now we'll start talking about, oh, okay, where do you want to host these? Is this a .NET application? Okay, it has to be Windows. If it's actually Linux, it might not work well and the likes. What if I package everything that is needed for that application to run in one place? In that case, we're going to start talking about container, container instances and the likes that we can leverage on. But when we get there, we'll start discussing. So at this point, I'm just going to go with code, and it says, oh, okay, what's the language that you use in deploying this? And I just go, oh, it's .NET LTS. Where do you want to deploy these? And I'm just going to go with the Canada Central. Now you can see I do not have an app service plan, and this guy is just going to go in there and say, oh, okay, we think you need the premium with just one VPCU. And I can say, no, I only need the free. I don't want to pay anything. And this guy is going to say, oh, okay, that's fine. It's just 60 CPU minutes per day. If you like it that way, after 60 minutes, this guy is not going to be available. I'll say, yes, that's fine. But if I pick that, I'm not going to be able to see some other options that I want to see. Like, you can see immediately I pick the free. It's just go ahead to disable the zone redundancy, because some of those things are not available in free. So I'm just gonna take the premium. Let's say I'm taking the premium. You can see how much I'm going to be paying if I leverage on any one of them. So here is where you determine the app service plan. At the end of the day, it's going to tell you how much you're going to. So you can see £33 If you leverage this one, if I pick this one, I'm going to be paying, £70. If I have this free, it's going to be zero. If it's basic, this is how much you're going to be paying per month. So regardless of the number of applications I'm now going to be deploying, regardless of the number of app service I'm going to be deploying in there, this is how much I'm going to be paying. So but this need a database. No, I don't need a database because this is just a web app. I don't. Nobody needs to query anything. It's not going to be storing any information about users, so you don't need to query anything. I don't need a database. I just want, an information website, and this is going to one good thing is now Microsoft, the way they've actually created these, you can also enable continuous deployment. When we get to DevOps, this is what we are going to be talking about. How do you want to be deploying your code into your app service? So this is disabled by default. If I enable this is going to tell you, how do you want to do this? Is there a repo you've created? Is there a branch you've created? Is this from GitHub Action? Is it from GitHub? Is it from Azure DevOps? I think they've removed the Azure DevOps one. I think this is just for GitHub now. But there is a way we can come back to it and exchange that also. Then okay, the monitor and secure. How do we secure the application? I was talking about how to secure the application. So how do we have maybe security to these, identity management, and the likes. So we'll see when we start configuring these, how do we enable public access? Do we want to have this enabled to the public, or do we want to just have this within the environment? So let's create this guy, and let's see. So this is how much I'm going to be paying. Let this just quickly create and see. So there are a lot of things I didn't enable. We can still come back to it and enable. Don't forget that you might be asking me, oh, why am I not able to see the the vertical scaling while you are creating this? Don't forget, I wasn't creating the app service plan. What I was creating was the app service itself. So we can go back after we have actually created these. The app service plan was just created along the way. We can go back after we created these, or after creating these, and just check. So my app service have actually been created, and you can see if you try to visit this particular link now, this particular endpoint, you are going to be able to see this. So the Azure Babafemi dots, you're just going to see like random page created by Microsoft. So you can see your web app is running. So now I can start deploying my whatever I want to deploy in the backend. So this is open to the public now. How do I secure it? How do I make sure that okay, this is for our internal documentation, and I want only users within my organization to be able to access? So we'll start looking at some of the other things also to make sure that that is. So if I want to secure that, I can go to the authentication here and create and add like an identity provider like Microsoft or something to secure this particular. But for now, so that means anyone, before you can actually access this particular application, you need to have maybe those accounts and the likes. But for now, I'm not going to be doing that because I'm going to be deleting this thing as soon as possible. So here, everything we are going to still go back to see. We can see custom domains. If you want to have XSL on that particular machine, on that particular application, you can have set the certificate here. You can see the custom domain. So if I have a custom domain that says babafemi.com, I can actually have that here. I can buy a new one. I can even buy in a different and point that particular custom domain to this particular IP, because this is the IP that has been assigned. So I just create, we talk about DNS records, where DNS zones, where you now create like a zone. The A zone is used for hosting. Then you point that particular domain name that you've gotten to this particular IP address, and your when you go to that particular domain name, it's just going to take you to this particular um, web application. So you can see lots of things. You can play with this. I can also look at the app service plan. If I click on the app service plan, within the app service plan, you can see the option of scaling up, scaling out. So you can decide, yeah, I've got just one slot, and I can create more slots and say, oh, okay, this slot is just running. I want to have more slots. If my plan doesn't allow me to have more slots, then I need to scale up, or scale up to have a different plan. Or if my plan does allow me and I want to create more instances for this my application or web app to be able to run well, I can actually leverage on that. So for now, I'm just gonna create this, so delete this and continue with this. So we can actually see that this is what I just went through on there. So the name of the application, when you create any of them, it's going to map with what we call the Azure website.net. Then you can see the publish. They've removed the, so when you want to create a new one, you'll see the static web and the likes. So it doesn't come within the publish again. So the runtime is which language is it running on? Is it a .NET application? Is it a Python 3 application and the likes? What operating system do you want to have this hosted on? So you can decide to have it online, but everything is going to be done by Microsoft for you, because the environment variables and everything in that is going to be done. So the regions where you want to deploy these, the app service plan. If you have an existing app service plan, yes, you can leverage on. If you have to create a new one, fine. Depending on the kind of app service plan that you've created, so you can have the zones enabled so that your web application is always available. I've been talking about slots, and slots. I said, depending on the kind of plans that you've selected, you can have up to 5 slots, and just name it, let's say within the standard, and name it based on the environment that you have here. Oh, dev, QA, test, prod, stage, whatever you want to have in have it, those names created with. And this is how it does. So when you do your deployment, it goes to the staging, and you can actually preview, oh, this is what we want, now it's working fine, you've tested it, then you now switch it to production. So at the time when you deploy to this particular stage, that deployment doesn't come to this other slot. So this is what the users are actually seeing. They are seeing like an old one, but you can actually see these and you are testing. If you are satisfied with these, then you can actually go ahead and switch, so that this guy can be the prod and this guy will be the staging, because this guy has got an older version of your application. So it makes sense where you can always check before you push anything to production, not like whatever you're doing, you're just pushing directly. So you can actually test, and when you're leveraging on virtual machines, maybe you want to create a virtual machine and have that application tested first, then you create another virtual machine for production. Why not just leverage on app service and create different slots, name it different environments, and test whatever you need to test, validate it before sending it to production. So it all depends on the kind of plan but when you leverage on the free, shared, and basic for dev test, you have 0 slots, you can only have 1 slot created. But when you leverage on the standard, premium, and isolated, you can have up to 20 depending on the kind of service plan you've actually created. And this is what the slots look like. You can see whatever name you want to give it to give to it. You can even have your slots cloned. So if you want to clone a setting from a particular slot and say, okay, let me just clone this particular settings, so you can have that done. But if not, you can have this start on a clean slate also. So you can just go in there to check the slot. And one good thing is your slots have got two. I wish I could show you. I've deleted that particular app service. So when you create it, it's going to have two different endpoints. So you can have something like preview.azurewebsite.net, and you have production.azurewebsite.net, or so you whatever you need to check. So your customers, what they are seeing is the production.azurewebsite.net. They are not seeing the preview. So you deploy to the preview, you check everything, then you push that to the production web application that your user can actually see. So and that's what this guy is saying. You can review, edit your settings before you swap your slot. How do we now secure our applications? Like I said, I showed you guys just the other time. I went to the authentication and see how to enable identity provider so that you can actually authenticate. So once you enable these identity providers, you want to say only users, you might want to say, only users with Microsoft accounts. You can even limit it. You just don't want to open it, but you want everyone on the internet, but people with Microsoft account only to be able to access, people with Apple account to be able to access. You can have it, you can also have it where only users added to the application can access it. Let's say you have internal application and you want to make sure that you restrict it to just internal guys, so you can also have that. Would actually check that one we leverage on the labs. Also, when it comes to the security part of it, how do we secure it? Like I said, you can have certificate created, which is going to be make sure that your web application, your mobile application, your API application, the function app that you've created is accessed over SSL. So you want HTTP. You want to have within there just the same way we've got NSG within our virtual machines, within the virtual network. So you can have you can set like network access for your app service also, and have allow or deny list to that particular access. So just think this as the same way your NSG operates. Then you can have your certificate. I just talked about the fact that when you create certificates or when you create any of secret, or let's use certificate in this case, but the certificate you've created, you just don't want to dump it within your app service, but you want to store it in a more secure environment. So you can have the key vault, which is one of the resources or services within Microsoft. But this particular resource is for storing sensitive data, so you can have that certificate or other things related when it comes to sensitive data related to that particular application or app service stored within that particular key vault. We'll still talk about that for sure. Okay, we talked about this also, where I've created an app service and a web application which is babafemi.azurewebsite.net. It doesn't make sense if I'm giving that to my investors and they just feel like, you've not heard of custom domain? You can have babafemi.com. How can you say this company is Sony, and Sony has a website, Sony.azurewebsite.net, and people just feel like, are you sure it's not scam? Because let's say I'm not an Azure user, I've never heard of Azure, and but what happens to Sony.com? That sounds right? So you can actually have your custom domain associated, and I showed you how you can actually associate it. Let's say you even get your custom domain from a different provider. How do you now point that custom domain? So you could see that there is an IP address created for us. All you need to do is just go to the domain zone, the DNS zone of that particular custom domain, wherever you've gotten it, and point that particular custom domain by creating an A record and add that specific IP address, and that will redirect that custom domain to that particular web application you've created. So you can actually look at that and see how we can actually do that. The last thing here is, oh, okay, we are deploying our application. We've got the application, the initial part of it deployed or backed up within our GitHub environment. Oh, okay. In case if anything happened, we can always restore. What? Every time we are updating that particular application, we are updating that application. An application we created in 2021. Let's say this is even an online store. At this point in 2025, we will have gotten a lot of different products. Some products that we don't even sell again, some product that we'll newly sell. Now let's say that there is no backup, and let's say that application just went down. There is a crash. Are you saying I should restore? I should just go and restore the one I have within my GitHub environment, which doesn't even have what I need. So I rather just leverage on the backup option on the app service. And you can see, depending on what, you cannot do a backup on the free, in case you don't know. So anything free, it's not free. So if you want to leverage on the backup, you need to have the standard or premium plan to be able to do this. And you can see, and so you can play with this and see. We've created an app service. We've verified that it's running, though we didn't explore the slots, but at least we did it. It's past the time, so I will suspend this one. We can continue from here next week. Any question from anyone before we call it a day?
Hi, Olufemi. So, just to ask, the web application we created, what we were seeing, is it the front end or the back end?
That's the front end. That's the front. That's whatever is kind of presented.
So from there, can we kind of build the landing page and all the G?
Yes, well, we are not. Yes. So that's why you have, at least you have, maybe from your virtual studio on your machine, or whatever where your code is, you can deploy it. Yes, the one you saw is just the initial, like a placeholder for you to show that whatever web app that you have created on Azure is present. Do you understand? So you can create your own and deploy it. At least there is a deployment section that I did not show you. I've deleted this, but this is not gonna. So yeah, it's not gonna work again. So that's why I don't want to click it. So if I click on this is the deployment center. Do you understand? Unfortunately, I've deleted this guy. It's just going to go in there, and so yeah. So where is your source code? If you want to do a manual push, or you want to do like a GitHub, local Git, whatever where you want to push it from, is there. So that's whatever you're seeing. Whatever I showed you was just a placeholder from Microsoft. When you create an app service, it doesn't show that that's your application. So when you do whatever you need to do, then you can actually push it to that particular application, to that specific web app that you've created.
Okay, great. Sorry, I have another question. So how do you compare, just being curious, how do you compare development and production? What's the difference?
No, I don't understand that question. So the dev environment is where you do your dev work. Yeah. So the production is what is open to your customers, to your clients. Whatever you are doing. So in a normal environment, or we would have more environment than just dev and prod. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So we have another environment we call testing, where you can actually test, the QA can test whatever, or you can have it as QA environment or slot where they can test whatever you've claimed that you've done. So there are a lot of process from development to production. Do you understand? So we do the testing. It might be manual, it might be automated. Then from there, that testing might even be for developers to test that they've done whatever they need to do. The same thing which they can do within their own dev environment. and you have the QA there doing their own testing also, maybe manual testing, automated testing, before you finally agree, or you can either say, oh, this is fine, we can push it to production. So production is your, application, your client ready application. But dev is
Okay.
where you do your rough work, just the basic. It's just like, me saying, oh, I just want to sketch something, as against when I want to present it to the world. Do you understand? Let's say I want to go in there to speak at an event tomorrow. I would start practicing. That's the rough work. Just in football also, they do training. That's the dev. When it comes to production, you come and play your Champions League match. Do you
Okay.
understand? So,
Yeah,
so
yeah. Then, sorry, I'm just trying to put an order into it. Now we have the development. Then from development, we have like maybe if there's need to deploy,
it
right?
it
We
all
have
depends. It depends on your own, the organization, the environment. Whatever environment you want to create and how you want to go with the. But the standard, you can have dev, test whatever you need to test. Let's say you even have just two slots. Maybe within there is where you now do all your testing, your editing, everything, and you make sure it's fine before you now switch the slot. Do you understand?
so at what point do you have deployment?
Yeah, at the point when it's ascertained that everything can go.
Okay, you now have deployment, and then you now have production, right?
No, so you deploy your application. When you deploy your application, it all depends on the environment you want to deploy to. So you deploy to dev. So your developers have those applications tested on their local environment, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So I can test it. Just give me a minute. Let me show you something. So I won't deploy until, so deployment is different because it doesn't matter which environment I want to deploy to. Do you understand? But
Mm.
as a developer, I'm just going to pick one of mine. I'm so sorry. I'm going to pick one of mine. No, 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 no. Give me a minute, please. Okay. Yeah. Let me look at this site. So let's say this is my own website.
Mm.
It's not my own. It's not my real website, but at least this is a website I created for testing, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do within the GitHub environment. Though. So I'm creating like a code space. Here, I can test whatever I need to test. Do you understand?
Mm. Mm.
Now, this is me as a developer writing the code.
Mm.
I'm not deploying until I feel like whatever I've written can actually go in there. So when I do a push to the environment, to the server, to the app service, and that's a deployment. Do you understand? Now it
Mm.
now depends on where I'm pushing to. Is it production? Is it so production is just an environment. Do you get what I'm saying? So let's
Mm.
say I want to test. So sorry, I'm looking for. There's something I'm looking for the package. Where is my site? Just give me a minute. No, it's not in static, man. Website. I'm not seeing what I need to see. Yeah, I can't. Oh, okay. So sorry. Um, Give me a minute. I want to see how to build this application. It's been a while. Okay. Give me a minute. No, that is start. Okay. No. So DocuSign was not found. Okay. Just give me a minute, please. I just need to. So this is me. I'm working on this particular application. I need to test it locally before I push it. When I push it is when I'm deploying. So I'm pushing it to an hosting, um, maybe a server, an app service, or wherever I want, users to be able to communicate with that particular application. So, but for me, as a developer, I'm actually checking this. This is going to. I'm not sure it's going to run. I have, it's been a while, but npm start. Let's see if it's going to start. Yep. So you can see I'm doing my application. I'm testing. I'm starting this application now. So this is the way the developer checks. This is running on this port now. Let's see, it's still running. Now it has started successfully. This is the application. Just hold on. So okay, so this is the site. You understand? And I'm like, oh, okay, this is fine. Oh, okay, this can actually go to production, right? Then this is where I now start deploying. So when I do a push to that particular application, a deployment to that application. So when I do a push now to wherever I want to host the application, it's called a deployment. Now the deployment now it now depends on the environment I want to deploy to. Is this dev? Is it QA? Is it production? Do you understand? So production, dev, those are just environment. So do you get the logic now?
Yeah.
So I'm just
Great.
gonna stop this. Don't worry about this code of the thing, no, please. Still come to the class next week. So but it's just me showing you, what we are going to be doing when we get to get DevOps. So it's step by step. You'll get there.
Yeah, I can't wait. Sorry, last question, Babafemi, last question. So going back to that same web app that you created, right? Now you said that one is like a front end, just like a. So now, what would the back end look like? Is it there? You have to create a storage. You have to create a database, depending
It
on
all
your
depends
app.
on what
Then,
it depends on the app. But for
then
this app that I just created, it was just an information web app. I don't need the storage. I don't need a database. It's not storing anything. I'm not storing user information where it's taking it from. So do you understand what I'm saying?
so
So
what will not be in the back end?
what backend? What do you mean by
Since that one
backend?
is front end, since that one is front end, so there must be back end, isn't it?
No. So wait, don't mix it up. So there are some applications that we got like all in one. Do you
Yeah.
understand? And
Yes.
this is the kind of application this web app will be.
Okay.
So
Okay.
when you are saying backend, so that means you have like an API at the back that you want that application to talk to. Do you
Yeah.
understand?
Yeah.
So the functionalities of the application is what you do on the back end. Do you
Yeah.
understand? The front end is what the user sees, just the
Yeah.
GUI. Then if there is a need for that particular application to, let's say, like the jam application where user needs to log in and their information needs to be queried, then they needs to now go get their result. Then in that case we'll say we need a database, we need an API that connects both the database and the front end and the likes, and the
Yeah.
functionalities. Yeah, so that's that. So when you go to any application, any Microsoft.com, all you see is just the front end, right?
Mm.
Whatever functionalities is what you can write it within your code. So you can have an application, have everything, so just in one place, and you can have a multi-application architecture, where you have the backend separated from the front end. But if you have an application like WordPress, it's all in one. There is no backend. There is no, so everything is just combined in one. So when we get to that, we'll start talking about why we need to separate our applications. Because an upgrade to an application like WordPress, if I want to upgrade any of the features there, and then I need to bring everything down, not like the front end and the back end application where I just say, okay, I'm upgrading something on the back end. Users can still see the front end, but they might not be able to click some things. Some things might not work and the likes. You understand what I'm saying? So,
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, thank you.
all right. Okay. Any other question? And if not, I'm just going to stop this here, and we talk next week. Thanks, everyone.